You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box, where you get the inside scoop on the steps action takers and decision makers take to align their purpose to their principles and achieve their goals in business and life. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. Each week, you'll hear from remarkable guests who have overcome challenges and obstacles to succeed in the face of adversity. By listening to their stories, you'll get practical tips, tools, and resources you can implement today to bust through your own internalized prisons of worry and doubt. And now, without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Welcome to this episode of the No Labels, No Limits podcast, a podcast all about helping action takers and decision makers like you align their purpose to their principles and achieve their goals in business and life. Hi, I'm Sarah from Sarah Box Coaching and Consulting. I'm a change agent, former executive director, and best-selling author of The Changemaker Ripple Effect, a book about how one person's drive, purpose, and boldness can impact thousands. I'm here to tell you that the life you want is possible with the right support, mindset, and strategy. And today's guest is going to talk a bit about that kind of strategy. But before I let you meet her in person or by voice, let me tell you a little bit about her. Our guest today is Denise Lee Yohn. Now, Denise is an interesting person. She is someone I met virtually and then just felt like I needed to know more about her so that I could introduce her to all of you. She is a brand leadership expert, an in-demand keynote speaker, and an influential artist. Let me start that. Denise is a brand leadership expert, an in-demand keynote speaker, and an influential author who challenges readers to think differently about brand leadership. So she's the author of the bestseller, What Great Brands Do, the 7 brand building principles that separate the best from the rest. And her newest book, Fusion, How Integrating Brand and Culture Powers the World's Greatest Companies. And frankly, that last book is the one that drew me to her, just reading about her. But in addition to being a powerful author and speaker, she's a regular contributor to the Harvard Business Review and Forbes, as well as writing for publications like Fast Company, Entrepreneur, Knowledge at Wharton, ChangeThis, and many others. I think it's also interesting that when the news media want an expert point of view on hot business issues, they call Denise. So you actually may have seen her on CNBC, in the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. And if you want to find out more about Denise, I'll have this in the notes, but you can find her at Denise Lee Yohn, we'll spell that out, .com. But in this episode, I've asked Denise, we got a chance to chat before we started, but I asked Denise if she will share with us the direct links between culture and business results, what an internal brand-led culture is, and why our organizational culture needs to match our brand. We're going to talk about how to identify the disconnect between brand and culture, and why it's important to fuse the external experience of your business or organization with the internal thinking and acting. And then you are also going to find out how to get a free chapter of her book. So now let's welcome our guest, Denise Lee Yohn. And I'm going to just refer to you as Denise. So hi, Denise, and it's great to have you on the show.
I'm so excited to be speaking with you, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And before we get into all the little topics I set up, I do have a question for you. What is one non-negotiable ritual, maybe a habit that you do every day that keeps you going in the direction of your big vision and purpose in life?
Well, I would say it is working out. So I am a fitness fanatic and I work out 6 days a week. I give myself 1 day to rest, but I always exercise and I always do it first thing in the morning. And it not only gives me all the health benefits that you would expect from exercise, but it really allows me to clear my mind. Sometimes I will be, marinating on an issue or a client question, and I'll go out for a run, and by the time I've come back, I've got it completely worked out. So it provides some moments of clarity and a fresh mind that just enables me to be focused and ready for my work every day.
Excellent. I'd like to say I start with exercise first thing, but I don't get to it till about 10 in the morning. I do work first. And,
well, and I found that if I don't do it first thing, it won't happen. And so that's why I do it. I don't even check email or phone, text, anything before I exercise, because I know that if I do that, I will get distracted and then the exercise will not happen.
Well, what's great about that too is you're putting your kind of like your health and your own centeredness first, so that you're grounded for the day too.
I like to think about it that way. Yeah.
So Denise, let's start by just some basic definitions. Can you tell me what brand is and how you think of brand in the work you do?
Yes. So the way that I define brand and the way that I use brand is that your brand is what you do and how you do it. Now, in business school, they'll tell you that the official definition of a brand is that it's the bundle of values and attributes that describe the value you create for customers and the way that you do business. But basically what that's saying is that your brand is what you do and how you do it. So it's not your name, it's not your logo, it's not your image, it's not even like your identity in terms of how you present yourself. It's really what you do and how you do it. And probably the best way to describe it is that it is how you are experienced by others, which therefore depends on what you do and how you do it.
Okay, that's helpful. So is it common that organizations have integrity between those two things, or is it common that there's often an outward and an inward kind of difference?
It's much more common that there is a gap between your external brand and your internal culture. In fact, I think the litmus test I often ask business leaders is, do you have a set of internal workplace or company core values, and then a distinct set of external brand values or attributes? And most people will say yes, because that's typically how companies operate. They think that there is a certain way that I'm going to run my company, and there's a certain way that I want my brand to be perceived, and they are often managed and developed and managed very separately.
Well, what happens when we separate those two and, we think the external and the internal either need to be or should be managed differently?
Well, I think you set yourself up for a lot of risk and potential crisis because, I think at the very basic level, if you don't do what you say you're going to do, you're breaking your promise. And in the business world, we talk about brand promise. And so if you are setting up an expectation that you don't deliver on, that disappoints your customers, which then opens you up to losing those customers, and not only losing those customers, but all the people that they will tell through their own social media and all their communication. So I think that's at a very immediate level, the kind of risk that you have when you have this gap between your external brand and your internal culture. But then you also see kind of bigger crises that happen for organizations. For example, Uber, everyone is hopefully familiar with kind of how Uber almost self-imploded in a way. And in part, the problem that they experience is that Uber was introduced to the world as this company that was going to make everyone feel like a rock star. They were going to democratize limousine service. Everyone was going to be able to, push a button on your phone and get your ride to show up and pick you up and take you wherever you wanted to go. So it was very like democratic. It was very progressive. It was very open, liberating. But then what we found out through a whistleblower and then other exposés that came out is that the internal culture of the company was very old-fashioned, backwards. It was just kind of this bro culture that was very gender biased, and even more than that, the company was engaged in a lot of the corrupt, the type of corrupt business practices that it said it was going to. It said it was supposed to fight against. So, they wanted to fight against the corrupt taxi and limousine commissions in the city. Well, they were, playing tricks on the law enforcement in the cities that they were operating in order to get around their restrictions. And so you find, so I think as customers, we find this brand that is proclaiming to be one thing, but we find out there's being something very different. And that loss of trust has, I think, really damaged Uber's reputation, and it also hurt their business somewhat, probably not as much as it could have, but I think it certainly made people really question, can we really trust these kinds of new startups who make these kinds of promises out there? So, and then of course there were all the lawsuits and the negative press that came with the whistleblower, and so that's even further crisis that the company had to undergo.
So if we think about that, and you're having that, I'm kind of elevating it, if there had been, even with the lawsuits, say they weren't about the internal, but just about the environment, like the skirting the regs or whatever, but had the internal culture been one where their contractors, I think, I don't know if they're considered contractors or what, the people who drive, but had they been in a different place or been held in a different place or cared for in a different place, they may have ended up being the biggest champions versus people saying, yeah, you should see what's happening on the backside.
You raised such an important point, Sarah, that absolutely, because you always have these kind of third parties or other people who are involved in your business who have so much influence on the way that your company is perceived and how it eventually is able to, whether it's able to operate or not. And to your point, these drivers could have been real champions and real supporters, and instead they ended up kind of being the loudest critical voices in the conversation.
So if we bring it down smaller to maybe a smaller business, because Uber now is no longer small, they're big, and just being able to think about, okay, so I'm a mid to small size business, and I think, so I've got my values on my website or this and that. How do I know how to translate those or make sure that I'm congruent? Do you start from the inside when you're building a business and saying, how is it that I want my business? How do I want my business to treat the people who work for me or with me? How do I want my products or services to be perceived? Where do you start in that brand culture piece?
Well, ideally you would start at the beginning, but the reality is that most of us work in businesses that already exist. And so you probably, as you said, have some sort of core values that you have articulated somewhere. And I think the first step is for you to go back to those core values and ask yourself, are these really right for us in terms of, do they capture our differentiation and our uniqueness and the specific ways that we create value for our customers or our clients, and then also our employees and our partners, et cetera. And really looking at whether those values are aligned with what you want to be known for in the world. So for example, I have been working, I was serving as a board member of a smaller nonprofit organization. And they have these core values that are very, very standard core values, like that they value respect and teamwork and collaboration and integrity. And as an organization, their strategic planning was all about becoming more innovative, moving into new areas, breaking through some of the barriers and boundaries that they had been held back by in the past. And I raised the point, I said, well, if that's the kind of perception, or if that's the kind of organization, if that's the kind of impact you want to have, you're going to need values that cultivate attitudes and behaviors among the people who are expected to deliver on that. So I always say everyone wants to be innovative. Well, do you have a culture that really embraces what innovation is all about, which is about curiosity and invention, and about accepting failures as learning and risk-taking? Are you operating with agility and flexibility? And so you need to look at your core values and say, are these serving the vision that we have for our organization? And if not, then you need to identify values that you can embrace that will take you in that direction. And then here's the important part, is in order to operationalize those values, you need to identify what are the specific behaviors that would demonstrate what those values are all about. So, for example, if you wanted to become known as an innovative company, and therefore you want to embrace failure as a learning opportunity is kind of one of your values. Well, what does that look like? That means rewarding a project manager when their project actually fails. That means doing after action analyses after everything you do, so that you can pull out the learning points and then socialize them throughout your organization. That means taking risks in areas that and being willing to invest in certain areas that you have not done before. So defining specific behaviors and specific actions that bring those values to life is how you actually make those values the way that you do things.
So that's interesting. When you give the example of the organization that you were on the board for, and you came upon that conversation as a group, ultimately, did the group say we're willing to change how we think and how we talk about, like, if we want to be innovative, like, are we willing to adapt and grow in that direction? Or did you find that people liked the word, but when it came down to what that meant to actually live the word, it was just too much tension, like it was like that, that's not us right now. So I'm curious what happens at that point.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it was the latter, and where the idea of it was far more compelling than the hard work and the change that was required in order to achieve that idea. And I find that to be the case with a lot of organizations. And so to me, I would advise companies, I'd rather see you have more attainable, realistic values and do them well than to espouse these kind of bigger, bolder values and just have them be empty words on a page. Because your customers and your clients won't believe them, and more importantly, your employees won't believe these kind of grandiose aspirations, and then you lose trust with them as well.
Tired of feeling stuck and ending with the same result? Want to know how Sarah can help you with one-on-one or organizational coaching? Then book your free discovery call at sarahbox.com/contact. Now, back to the show.
I think that's an important point to make, because it's easy to look external and say, that's what's happening with those organizations. But really, it's not that uncommon to, like, anytime you want to go in a new direction, to have to really assess, does it fit, either individually as a person or an organization? And if so, what are the implications of that? How might we need to shift? And that's really interesting when it comes down to values, because one example, or one, I think, test that someone recommended to look at is, we can read a company's website and see the values, but if you don't experience those values when you're interacting with staff, not the lead staff necessarily, but anybody, and you feel that disconnect, it's one way of perceiving that something's not aligned. Not that it's bad, just that it's not aligned.
Tired of feeling stuck and ending with the same result? Want to know how Sarah can help you with one-on-one or organizational coaching? Then book your free discovery call at sarahbox.com/contact. Now, back to the show.
Can you talk about like the downside of not spending time looking at your culture, the internal and external blending of your brand and culture?
Well, there are lots of negative implications or potential negative outcomes for not attending to your culture, not actively cultivating the kind of culture you want. And a lot of those negative impacts have to do with your employees, because not only will you have difficulty retaining employees, because as I said, they kind of will either not trust you or not believe you, or they just won't be motivated to work for you, but yeah, then you won't be able to attract new ones either. I think that there is, before the whole coronavirus pandemic happened, there was this kind of war for talent and labor shortage in a lot of sectors. And although I think that in the short term, we will see some modulation in that because of the pandemic, I would think, a year from now, 18 months from now, we're going to see ourselves back in the same situation where to get the kinds of skilled workers that you want, it's very difficult. And what we're finding is that talent wants to come to an organization where culture is cultivated, where there's a strong sense of purpose, clear values, a desirable, engaging employee experience that really brings the culture to life and helps and engages them to participate in building the culture. And so you will not be able to attract the kinds of people you want if you're not attending to culture. And then, there's all the, as I said, kind of customer implications of not delivering the kinds of experiences and the kind of value that you're promising. And a lot of the expectations that people have on organizations today, the people meaning customers and clients have on organizations, is that you are you're acting with integrity and authenticity, that you actually are who you say you are, that you're treating your employees and your partners fairly. Because, we have today as customers, as consumers, we have so many choices out there that we're really looking for to do business with organizations that we can believe in and that we can trust as well. And so without that kind of the integrity and the integration alignment that comes from fusing your brand and your culture, you lose out for both external and internal people.
My sense is if you're operating out of your values and those have been consistent, it's not going to be a big leap for you to do what you need to do to stay consistent both with your internal team as well as your customers.
I 100% agree with you, Sarah. Exactly. I mean, it just becomes the way you do things and the filter through which everything, every decision that you make flows through. And and I think that this crisis is going to expose the companies who either have been doing that or who kind of risen to the challenge in the moment of crisis, and companies who are just kind of trying to put Band-Aids or kind of, put lipstick on a pig and make it look like they're trying to do these things and not really succeeding.
So Denise, will you share more about your book, Fusion? This is a great time to be considering this. We have an opportunity as we take a step back to really think about being congruent and positioning ourselves in both the for-profit and nonprofit sector for working better and doing better in our work.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. So yes, Fusion, how integrating brand and culture powers the world's greatest companies, is all about how do you achieve that integration and alignment between what you say you are and what you actually do. And, I talk about it in terms of your external brand identity and your internal culture, but knowing how I define brand, we really are talking about business performance and business results. What you want to accomplish in the world, and then how you're going to accomplish it. And so the book I intended it to be very practical in a sense that lays out specific steps that leaders should take in order to achieve this brand culture fusion. So at the beginning, you need to lay your foundation by ensuring that you have an overarching purpose and a single set of core values to drive, align, and guide everything that you do. And then, you as a leader need to accept your responsibility for culture and brand building, and also to assess where you are today in terms of your brand culture fusion. And once you've kind of laid all that foundation, then you can start going through the steps that I outline for achieving brand culture fusion. Should I just kind of briefly outline those steps? Does that make sense, Sarah?
That would be great if you could do that. And I would really appreciate that.
Okay, so the first step or first strategy to achieve brand culture fusion is to organize and operate on brand. Meaning you want to drive your brand purpose and your values throughout your entire organization in terms of the way that it's designed. And when I say organizational design, I'm talking about your org chart, who reports to who, and who has which responsibilities, and which teams need to work together, and which teams need to assume certain new responsibilities, for example. So in your organizational design, as well as your operational processes. So how you actually do both kind of your big processes, whether it's like research and development, or whether it's strategic planning, or whether it's service development, whatever that may be, and also your day-to-day processes, whether that's like budgeting and I talk about like submitting expense reports and offering vacation or whatever. You want to look at all of those aspects of the way your organization is designed and the way that it operates, and ensure that you are being guided, your organization is being guided by your overarching purpose and your core values. The second strategy is to create culture-changing employee experiences. So I think, a lot of people know about customer experience these days, that everything that the customer experiences, everything they see, hear, touch, taste, feel, that's all the customer experience. Well, it's just as important for you to design and manage your employee experience, ensuring that every aspect, everything, every interaction, every step, every touch point that an employee experiences reinforces your desired culture and really involves them in this culture building and kind of delivering or operationalizing on the culture throughout the organization. The next step is to sweat the small stuff. There's lots of daily routines and things that you do and things that you have within your organization that send culture signals to the people within your organization. Rituals and artifacts, your policies and procedures, they all can shape your culture, even in the smallest things of like, what you name your conference rooms, or if there's a certain, type of a certain T-shirt that you all wear on a certain day to celebrate a specific moment of your history, or whatever the case may be. These kind of everyday details of organizational life actually have big implications and big impact on your culture. So you want to sweat the small stuff. And then the fourth strategy is to ignite your transformation through employee brand engagement. So employee brand engagement is all about ensuring that every employee in your organization is engaged with your brand specifically, not just the folks in sales and marketing, but everyone in your organization has impact on how your brand is perceived. I talk about like how someone in accounting who runs your invoicing process has a lot of impact on how a customer perceives your organization. And they might not think of themselves as a brand builder, but they should. And so you want to make sure that every person in your organization understands what your brand stands for in their head. They are motivated and passionate about your brand in their hearts. And then they are equipped and empowered with their hands and their feet to build their brand in all their daily decisions and behaviors and actions they take. So those are 4 strategies or 4 steps for cultivating your culture around your brand values. The last step is really for companies that maybe have a very strong culture, but not so much a strong brand. And so I outline certain ways that you can build your brand from the inside out. Maybe taking these values, if you do have these very unique, distinctive, instructive, powerful values, and how you can show those, manifest them in very obvious ways to your customers, and therefore build your brand perception around them. But those together, those 4, brand first steps, and then the 5th step, which is more of a culture first step, those are the ways that you achieve brand culture fusion.
That is brilliant. And I really appreciate the breakdown of the steps, because especially when you think about if you don't have the brand yet, but you've got a really strong culture, having that 5th kind of step to be able to integrate and create the outward, or the brand actually, not necessarily just the outward. Mm-hmm. So Denise, I know that you can get, or readers can get, a chapter of the book. Will you talk about how to do that so we can make sure folks can actually see and feel the detail of what you've got there?
Yes, and thank you so much for asking, Sarah. So if you go to my website, DeniseLeeYohn.com, right on the homepage, there is a place where you can input your email address to download the first chapter of my book for free. And then actually through my website, you can also access lots of other free resources and materials about fusion, as well as about my first book, What Great Brands Do. And, so it's kind of, my website's kind of a portal to all of those resources that are available for you to download. For example, I talked about designing your employee experiences. Well, there's a template and a worksheet that you can download on my website that will help you be able to do that. And then one of the things that's unique to Fusion is that I have created an online assessment that helps you assess where you are in your journey to brand culture fusion. And also, if you don't have clarity on exactly what your culture should be or what your values should be, the assessment will help you pinpoint those based on your desired brand identity as well. And the assessment's free. The URL is right available on my site, and you'll get a personalized report once you complete the assessment.
That's such a great gift. And I'm just going to start sharing that with folks who I work with, because first of all, it'll be great information, and it'll be done by someone who's an expert in it.
Well, thank you. That would be great. That would be terrific. I really want people, the reason I wrote the book is because I saw that so many leaders were struggling with culture building and struggling with this alignment between brand and culture. And so I really wanted to help them and be of service. And so the assessment is just part of that.
That's great. So Denise, as we wrap up today, I just want to give you a heartfelt thanks for your time today. It's been great. And I look forward to knowing and learning and possibly even interacting with you more in the future.
Absolutely. Me too, Sarah.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic vision coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. So please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Until next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.